I've always loved hitchhiking. It was a chance to meet new people and explore uncharted places. But one day my experience turned into a real nightmare. I was standing by the side of an empty road when a dark SUV pulled up. The driver looked normal, middle-aged, with a friendly smile and a hat on his head. He said he was heading to a nearby town and would happily take me along. I jumped into the car and we set off. As we drove, we chatted. He talked about his life, work, and hobbies, but soon the conversation turned strange. He started asking me questions that made me uneasy about my family, my friends, and how I spent my time. I answered, trying not to show my discomfort, but inside anxiety was building. When we left the town behind, the road became narrow and winding. I noticed there were no people or houses around. Suddenly, the driver sharply turned onto a dirt road and stopped. "We'll be there soon," he said, but his tone was cold. Panic gripped me. "Where are we going?" I asked, trying to mask my fear. He just smiled and pointed to the forest surrounding us. "You love nature, don't you?" Terror engulfed me. I quickly flung the door open and jumped out of the car, but he grabbed my wrist and, looking into my eyes, said, "Where are you going, buddy?" "Just starting the fun." I broke free and ran toward the woods. Behind me, I heard the sound of the opening and I felt my heart racing in my chest. I ran without looking back and soon stumbled upon a path leading deeper into the forest. Moments later, I heard his footsteps. I knew he was chasing me. I turned off to the side, hiding behind trees and bushes. Every sound made my blood run cold. Through the leaves, light was breaking through, and I stumbled upon a small clearing. In the center stood an old, abandoned house covered in moss and vines. I rushed inside, hoping he wouldn't find me. Inside, there was complete silence, and I quickly began to look around. In the corner, I saw an old lamp, a dusty table and chairs, but the most horrifying thing on the walls hung photographs. They were portraits of people who looked like me, with the same smiles and eyes. But with one detail, each had a trail of blood on their faces. I realized these were previous travelers who had once gotten into his car. Suddenly, I heard footsteps outside the window. I held my breath, hiding behind the table. The door slowly creaked open, and he entered, a smile on his face. "You have no idea how long I've waited for this moment," he said, and his voice became hoarse. "Now you're part of my collection." I knew there was no escape. I felt the cold grip of fear in my heart, and in that moment, I understood that this ride was the end of my journey. Story number 2. In a dark alley bathed in the dim light of a street lamp, an old car sat idling. Its exterior was rusted, and the windows were fogged. At night, it looked like a forgotten relic, but inside sat Jake, a college student, intently watching the passers-by. Megan, exhausted from a wild party, walked home, taking a shortcut through the alley. As she made her way, she noticed something strange. A man in a gray coat leaning against the wall, staring directly at her. There was something unsettling in his gaze, but she brushed it off and quickened her pace. As she passed by, the car creaked open, and suddenly the man called out, "Hey, wait!" Megan's heart raced. She turned to see his face, someone she vaguely recognized. It was Jake, a classmate she'd seen occasionally in lectures. "What are you doing here?" she asked, narrowing her eyes suspiciously. "Just waiting for you," he replied with a slight smile that seemed to conceal more than it revealed. "Hop in. I'll give you a ride." Megan hesitated. Instinct told her to decline, but she knew he wasn't dangerous. "Okay," she sighed, sliding into the car. Inside, the air smelled of old cigarettes and a sweet perfume. As Jake started the engine, Megan's mind drifted to memories of their shared laughter and conversations about classes. She felt herself relax, but as they turned onto a deserted street, unease crept back in. "You know," Jake began, his voice growing serious, "I've always thought you were special. There's something about you. Something mysterious." Megan felt a chill run down her spine. "What do you mean?" Jake's gaze intensified. "Have you ever considered that there's more to life than this? That everything around us could just be an illusion?" "What are you talking about?" Megan stared at him, bewildered. "I want to show you," he said softly. Before she could respond, he took another turn onto an even darker road. "Where I'm taking you, you'll understand." Panic surged through her. "Jake, I think I should get out." But he only laughed, a sound that felt eerily sinister. "You don't want to miss your chance to learn the truth, do you?" At that moment, realization hit Megan. She was trapped. Her instinct screamed for her to escape. Glancing out the window, she saw nothing but darkness. No people, no lights, just an enveloping void. "Listen, stop the car," she shouted, but he just smiled, relishing her fear. Megan recalled her friend Sarah, who always said, "In any situation, the key is to stay calm." "Jake," she said, trying to keep her voice steady, "if you really want me to understand what you're talking about, let's just talk. Turn around. I'm listening." Jake halted the car and turned to her, uncertainty flashing in his eyes. "Are you serious?" "Yeah, let's just talk," she insisted, mentally preparing herself to find a way out of this situation. After a brief pause, he nodded slowly. "All right, but only because I appreciate your honesty." Megan sighed with relief as he turned the car around. She knew she had to stay alert, but now that she had regained some control, there was a flicker of hope. Maybe this night would end well after all. Ahead lay a long journey back, but with her newfound resolve, Megan had a chance to navigate this dark maze and find her way home. Story number 3. In mid-October 2023, as sunlight filtered softly through the clouds, I stood by the roadside in France. I urgently needed to get to Paris to pick up my paintings from an exhibition. That day I was full of hope, but I didn't expect a strange encounter awaited me. I noticed a small, battered car, and the driver, a thin, unshaven man in his 40s, offered to give me a ride. His English was broken and his face looked worn. I climbed into his car, thinking it would be just an ordinary trip. The first few minutes passed in casual conversation. He asked about my hometown and life, and I shared my dreams of becoming an artist in return. But soon the conversation took an unexpected turn. The driver suddenly opened the glove compartment and pulled out several passports. "These are my girlfriend's," he said, handing me the documents. I looked at them and felt a chill seep into my heart. Each passport was accompanied by a horrific story. One died in a car crash, another from cancer, one fell off a motorcycle, and the fourth off a horse. "How did you even keep these?" I asked, trying to mask my fear. "They're my memories," he said, smiling, but there was no joy in his eyes, only emptiness. For a moment I hesitated, realizing this wasn't just a strange hobby. Our trip was becoming something sinister. With every mile, I felt the tension rising and thought about how to get out of this situation. "Maybe we should turn back," I suggested, trying to sound confident. His face changed. He gripped the steering wheel tighter, his knuckles turning white. "No, we're almost there. I know a shortcut." He turned off the main road onto a narrow country lane, surrounded by dense trees. The landscape became increasingly gloomy and oppressive. I glanced back, feeling that sense of danger clinging to me. "I really need to get to the exhibition," I repeated, losing hope. At that moment, he stopped the car. "Are you afraid of me?" he asked, and there was something threatening in his voice. I took a deep breath, realizing I needed to act. "No, just don't like long trips. How about we stop in the village? I can catch a bus from there." He hesitated, but I saw doubt flicker in his eyes. I realized this might be my chance. "Listen," I continued, "I can pay you if you wait." After a brief pause, he nodded. "Okay, we'll stop." I breathed a sigh of relief as he turned on the blinker and pulled into a small village. We parked by a cafe, and I got out of the car, thanking him for the ride. I quickly headed inside and then toward the bus stop. When I saw the approaching bus, I turned around and noticed his car driving away, leaving only dust on the road. I exhaled in relief, knowing I had managed to avoid danger. That night, I reached Paris and collected my paintings, but the shadow of that strange and eerie encounter would forever linger in my heart. Story number 4. In a small town, hidden among forests and fields, lived a young woman named Emma. She was always kind and responsive, ready to help anyone in need. One day, while heading to the big city for some shopping, she noticed a man standing by the side of the road. He looked tired and worn out, his hand outstretched in the familiar hitchhiking gesture, thumb up. Without hesitation, Emma stopped. The man introduced himself as Michael and asked for a ride into the city. As they drove, they struck up a conversation, and Emma, noticing that Michael was polite and modest, decided to buy him lunch at a small cafe. They talked about life, work, and dreams, and Emma felt a pleasant connection between them. When they arrived in the city, Michael asked for her phone number so he could thank her later. Flattered, Emma wrote it down without hesitation and handed it to him. They said their goodbyes, and she drove away, feeling happy that she had been able to help. A few days later, Emma received an unexpected call. It was Michael. He expressed his gratitude again for the ride and lunch, and they chatted some more. Emma was glad to hear his voice, but soon she noticed the conversation becoming increasingly strange. Michael began to ask questions about her life, family, and work. Eventually, he suggested they meet again. Feeling a slight unease, Emma tried not to show it. She politely declined, saying she was busy. Michael hesitated for a moment and then, with a hint of pressure in his voice, asked why. Emma, feeling uncomfortable, cut off the conversation but was left in confusion. A few weeks later, Emma heard on the news about a man who matched Michael's description. He was linked to a series of strange and even threatening incidents where men targeted women under the guise of offering help. Emma's heart sank. She realized how close she had come to a dangerous situation. From that point on, Emma became more cautious. She still wanted to help people, but not as thoughtlessly as before, smiling at passers-by and only stopping for those who truly looked like they were in distress. She always remembered her lesson, and though her desire to help remained in her heart, she now knew that sometimes it was wise to be more careful and trust her intuition. Story number 5. In 1977, a young woman named Deborah Wilson set out to explore the picturesque mountains of Colorado. Full of energy and a sense of adventure, she decided to hitch a ride. The sun was shining brightly, and the air was fresh with the scent of pine. Soon a pickup truck pulled over for her. The driver, a middle-aged man with a friendly smile, struck up a conversation. He seemed harmless and feeling confident. Deborah got into the car. They discussed the weather, travel, and life in general. Deborah was happy, but as they ventured deeper into the mountains, her joy shifted to a light unease. Suddenly, the driver turned onto a narrow road that led to a more remote area. Deborah felt her heart race. "Where are we going?" she asked, trying to keep her composure. "Don't worry, just a little off the beaten path," he replied, but his voice didn't sound as reassuring as before. Fear gripped Deborah as she realized there were no other people around, no houses, just dark trees and mountain slopes. Without warning, the driver stopped the car in a secluded spot and turned to her with a cold stare. "You know, I'm not going to let you go," he said, and Deborah felt a chill run down her spine. Gathering her strength, she quickly began to act. When he distracted himself by opening the door, she flung her door open and bolted into the forest. She didn't look back, running deeper into the woods where the trees concealed her from sight. She could hear his shouts behind her, and she knew he wasn't going to give up. With each step, she felt the ground shifting beneath her, but fear gave her strength. Suddenly, she tripped and fell, but she got back on her feet and kept running, hiding behind bushes. Realizing she couldn't stay in one place, she spotted a narrow trail and decided to follow it. Her heart raced in her chest, and every rustle made her freeze. After a while, she heard the sound of a car. This was her salvation. Deborah dashed onto the road, waving her arms, and fortunately, one of the cars stopped. The driver, seeing her terrified face, immediately understood that something was wrong. "Get in quickly," he said, and Deborah jumped into the car, feeling tears welling up in her eyes. She told the driver everything that had happened. He quickly called the police, and soon they were speeding down the road, leaving behind the horrors that almost became her fate. When Deborah finally reached safety, she knew her life would never be the same. This experience changed her forever, but it also became a lesson. Trust your instincts and never forget about your safety. Her story about how easily one can fall into a trap served as a warning for anyone who ever thought hitchhiking was just a fun adventure. In a world full of dangers, it's essential to stay vigilant and remember that behind every smile, something terrifying may lurk. Story number 6. In the Midwest, Sarah set out on what she hoped would be a fun hitchhiking adventure. After a few hours of waiting, she finally got a ride from a friendly-looking driver. He was charming and chatty at first, making small talk that put her somewhat at ease. However, as the miles rolled by, Sarah began to feel an unsettling shift in the atmosphere. The driver's demeanor subtly changed. His laughter turned into forced smiles, and his questions became increasingly personal. Sarah's instincts kicked in, warning her that something was off. She felt a growing sense of dread, as if an unseen weight was pressing down on her. Despite her discomfort, she hesitated to ask him to pull over, unsure of how he would react. As they drove deeper into the countryside, the scenery became more desolate, with fewer cars on the road and the sun sinking lower in the sky. Panic began to rise within her. She stole glances at the driver, who seemed oblivious to her growing anxiety. Her mind raced with thoughts of escape, but fear held her back. Finally, as they approached a secluded area, the driver made a sudden turn off the main road. Sarah's heart raced as she realized she was entering a dangerous situation. She knew she had to act fast. Gathering her courage, she took a deep breath and with a shaky voice asked him to stop. The driver looked at her, his expression shifting from friendly to menacing in an instant. He refused to pull over, his grip on the steering wheel tightening. In that moment, Sarah understood that she was in serious trouble. Desperate and fueled by adrenaline, she seized the moment when he slowed down to navigate a rough patch of road. With all her strength, she unbuckled her seatbelt and flung open the door, rolling out of the moving car onto the gravel. Scrambling to her feet, Sarah ran into the nearby woods, heart pounding in her chest. Behind her, she heard the screech of tires and the driver yelling in frustration. Fear propelled her forward as she ducked behind trees, trying to quiet her breath. After what felt like an eternity, she managed to find a small road where a passing car finally stopped. With tears streaming down her face, she begged the driver for help, recounting her terrifying experience. The kind stranger rushed her to safety, where she was able to contact the authorities. Sarah's harrowing ordeal serves as a crucial reminder of the importance of trusting one's gut feelings when faced with danger. The experience forever changed her, instilling a deeper understanding of the risks involved in hitchhiking. She learned that sometimes it's vital to listen to that inner voice urging you to protect yourself because it might just save your life. On that rainy evening, after a long shift at the late-night diner, I was driving home along my usual route. The landscape, beautiful by day, transformed into a series of dark shadows at night, with only the occasional flickering lights of small shops and restaurants. I felt oddly energetic, despite my fatigue, and knew I'd have to take melatonin when I got home. As I passed a small parking lot near a well-known deli, I saw a woman standing under a streetlight. She was tall, about 6 feet, and despite the rain, her smile shone as if she were oblivious to the downpour. I slowed down and rolled down my window. "Do you need help?" I called out, trying to shake off my awkwardness. She stepped closer, her eyes sparkling with gratitude. "Oh, you're a real hero," she exclaimed as she opened the door and got into my car. "I'm just heading into town, not far from here." I asked where she lived, and when she answered, I felt a slight unease. Her voice was warm, but there was an underlying tension in her tone. I noticed she was missing a few teeth, but she looked tidy, even though she was drenched. "Do you need anything from the store?" I asked as we approached a gas station. "No, thank you," she replied with a smile. "I'm just happy you stopped." I got out of the car and headed into the store, trying to push away the strange feeling. After grabbing some snacks and drinks, I returned to the car. She looked at me with such genuine appreciation that I felt a bit better. "You're a kind person," she said as she accepted the treats from me. "Just trying to do something good," I replied, feeling a bit awkward. As we drove, the conversation became lighter. She shared memories of the town, how everything had changed over the years. Her stories were vivid and full of emotion, and I gradually began to relax. "I always say we need to look out for each other," she remarked as we passed dark stretches of road. "In our times, that's especially important." We stopped on the side of the road, and I felt a sense of unease building inside me. "This is good," she said, pointing to a small park. "You can drop me off here." I nodded uncertainly, glancing around. "Are you sure?" I asked. "It's dark." "Yes, it's perfect," she insisted with a smile. "Thank you for everything. You truly made my evening better." She stepped out of the car, and I suddenly felt a chill in the air. I watched her walk away into the rain, her silhouette fading into the night. Something inside me urged me to ask her more, to learn how she ended up alone on such a night, but instead I just nodded, feeling a sense of unease growing in my chest. As I drove away, the rain poured harder, and I tried to calm my thoughts. My intuition whispered that this encounter was something more than just random kindness. When I got home, I took the melatonin and lay down, but sleep wouldn't come. Thoughts of the woman and who she was spun around in my mind. Watching the flickering lights outside my window, I realized one thing: sometimes the most ordinary actions can lead to the most extraordinary consequences. Hey friends, if you enjoy our content, please subscribe to our channel. It really helps us grow. Just hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss anything. Thanks for your support.